A diamond in disguise. Prepare for a story that will chill you to the bone and make you question everything you think you know. If this narrative grabs you from the first second, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable, real-life dramas. Have you ever wondered what secrets the people closest to you are hiding? Leave your thoughts in the comments. What if the quiet, loving woman who sacrificed everything for you was secretly one of the richest people in the world? For 7 years, Maeve lived a simple life, hiding her billionaire identity for the man she loved. She traded boardrooms for bake sales, haute couture for bargain bins, all for a husband who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone. When he cast her aside for a richer woman, he thought he was trading up. He had no idea he had just discarded a diamond for a piece of glass. This is the story of how a hidden heiress, betrayed and broken, unleashed her true power and came back to burn his world to the ground. To the outside world, Maeve Smith was painfully ordinary. She lived in a modest, 2-story colonial in the quiet suburb of Hampton, a town known more for its historic charm than its proximity to the ultra-rich. Her days were a calm rhythm of tending to her small garden, volunteering at the local library, and preparing elaborate meals for her husband, Richard Smith. She drove a reliable 5-year-old Ford, clipped coupons, and her greatest indulgence was a weekly latte from the local coffee shop. The daily Maeve was sweet, unassuming, and utterly devoted to the man she had married 7 years ago. Richard was the center of her universe. He was handsome, ambitious, and possessed a charisma that could charm the most hardened cynic. He worked as a mid-level financial analyst at a respectable but unremarkable firm in downtown London. To his colleagues, he was a man on the rise, sharp and ambitious, but held back by his humble circumstances. He often lamented his lot in life, speaking of grand ambitions that seemed laughably out of reach. "If only I had the capital," he would sigh to his work friends over cheap beers. "I could be running this city." What no one knew, least of all Richard, was that the woman he came home to every night, the woman who mended his socks and meticulously managed their tight budget, was not Maeve Smith, the orphan she claimed to be. She was Maeve Vance, the sole heir to the Vance Corp. Conglomerate, a global empire with holdings in technology, real estate, and energy, valued at over £200 billion. Maeve had met Richard during her final year at the London School of Economics, where she was studying art history under an assumed name, desperate to taste normalcy after a childhood suffocated by tutors, bodyguards, and the cold, calculating world of high finance. Her parents, Richard and Eleanor Vance, had been brilliant but distant figures, more at home in a boardroom than a playroom. They had died in a private jet crash when she was 18, leaving her in the care of her formidable grandmother, Augusta Vance, and as the sole heir to their vast fortune. Overwhelmed by the weight of her inheritance and the prying eyes of the world, Maeve had devised a plan to escape, just for a while. Richard, then a scholarship business student, was everything her world was not. He was passionate, saw her for who she was, and seemed unconcerned with wealth or status. When he proposed a simple life, far from the glittering pressures of the elite, Maeve saw it as a romantic fantasy made real. She believed she had found a man who loved her, not her name. And so, with a heavy heart, but a hopeful spirit, she made a choice. She placed her entire fortune into a blind trust, accessible only by a complex series of protocols known to her and her family's most trusted lawyer, Javier Garcia. She told Richard a fabricated story of a lonely childhood in a forgotten orphanage, and embraced her new identity as a woman with nothing but her husband's love. For 7 years, she played the part to perfection. She found genuine joy in the simplicity, in the anonymity. Watching Richard strive, she felt a sense of pride. She believed she was supporting his dreams, that their love was a fortress built on a stronger foundation than money. But cracks had begun to appear in their fortress. Richard's ambition, a quality she once admired, had soured into a bitter resentment. He grew tired of their modest life. He started making snide remarks about her simple clothes, their budget vacations, and her lack of connections. "Did you see the ring on David Walker's new fiancée?" he would comment after a work event, his eyes glittering with a greedy light. "Must be 10 carats. Her father is a shipping magnate from Cornwall." Then he would look at Maeve's simple gold band, a symbol of the life he now despised, and his lip would curl into a slight sneer. He began working late, attending networking events that left him smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. He grew distant, his touch infrequent and perfunctory. The easy laughter that once filled their small home was replaced by a tense silence, punctuated by Richard's heavy sighs of dissatisfaction. Maeve felt the shift in her bones. A cold dread began to pool in her stomach. She tried to talk to him, to bridge the growing chasm between them, but her gentle inquiries were met with irritation and accusations. "What is there to talk about, Maeve?" he snapped one evening, tossing his briefcase onto the dining table she had so carefully set. "We're stagnant, going nowhere. I'm drowning, and you're content with just floating." "I thought we were happy," she whispered, her heart aching. "I thought this was what you wanted." "I wanted a partner," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "Not a homemaker. I need someone who can help me. Someone with resources." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and sharp. Resources. It was a word that had defined her entire life, a word she had run from, only to have it thrown in her face by the man she had sacrificed everything for. She looked at Richard, at the stranger before her, his face twisted by a greedy ambition she had never truly seen before. And for the first time in 7 years, she felt the ghost of Maeve Vance stir inside her. The game that had begun as a romantic escape was about to become a brutal war, and she was the only one who knew the true power of the weapons at her disposal. The final betrayal, the final blow came on a crisp October afternoon, the air carrying the scent of wood smoke and decaying leaves. It was their 7th wedding anniversary. Maeve had spent all day preparing a feast, a recreation of their first date. Hand-rolled pasta, a rich bolognese sauce she had simmered for hours, and a bottle of Chianti she had splurged on. She wore a simple blue dress he had once said was the color of his favorite sky. She waited, the table set with their best china, the candles flickering, her heart a fragile mix of hope and apprehension. Richard came home 3 hours late. He didn't even look at the meticulously prepared dinner. His face was flushed with excitement. His eyes glowed with a manic energy she didn't recognize. He threw a thick, cream-colored envelope onto the table, where it landed with a soft thump next to the untouched breadsticks. "What's this?" Maeve asked, her voice small. "That," he said, pulling at his tie, a triumphant smile on his lips, "is our future. Or rather, my future." Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were divorce papers. The sterile, legal language was a brutal counterpoint to the romantic dinner she had prepared. The words blurred, but the message was clear. Irreconcilable differences. No fault. A clean break. "I don't understand," she stammered, looking at him, her eyes wide with disbelief and pain. "Our anniversary." "Oh, Maeve, please," he sneered, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so naive. Did you really think this was working? This pathetic little life? I'm destined for more. I've been given a chance, a real one, and I can't have you holding me back." The name on the legal documents, The petitioner opposite his was a name she had heard him mention with increasing reverence: Victoria Rothschild, heiress to the European Rothschild banking fortune. A woman whose image was a staple on the society pages, always dripping in jewels and haute couture. A woman of resources. The pieces of his recent behavior clicked into place with a sickening clarity. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the smell of Chanel No. 5 clinging to his shirts. He hadn't just fallen out of love with her. He had been actively replacing her. "You're leaving me for her?" Maeve's voice was barely a whisper. The pain was a physical thing, a shard of ice piercing her chest. "Leaving you? Darling, that implies we were on the same level to begin with," he said, his cruelty absolute. He began to pace the small living room, his movement suddenly too big for the space. "Victoria understands me. She understands ambition. Her father, Charles Rothschild, is willing to make me a senior partner in his new private equity firm. This is the big leagues, Maeve. This is where I belong." He finally stopped and looked at her. His gaze swept over her simple dress, her face, streaked with unshed tears, with a barely concealed pity. "Look, I'll be fair. The house is mortgaged, but there's a little equity. You can have it. You can keep the car. It should be enough for a woman of your simple needs. Think of it as a severance package for 7 years of service." 7 years of service. Not of love, not of partnership. Service. The words echoed in the sudden silence of the room. He saw her as an employee. He was now downsizing. The love she had poured into his life, the sacrifices she had made, the identity she had abandoned, all of it was worthless to him. He hadn't just broken her heart. He had invalidated her entire existence. "I gave you everything," she said, the words catching in her throat, thick with unwept tears. Richard laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "You gave me nothing, Maeve. You had nothing to give. That's the whole problem." He picked up his briefcase. Not the scuffed leather one she had bought him 5 years ago, but a new, sleek, aluminum one she had never seen before. A gift, no doubt, from Victoria. He stopped at the door, turning to deliver one last devastating blow. "I hope you find a quiet life for yourself," he said, his voice tinged with condescending magnanimity. "Maybe you can work at that library you love so much. It suits you. Just sign the papers. It's better for everyone if we make this quick and quiet." The door closed behind him, leaving Maeve alone in the flickering candlelight. The smell of the bolognese she had so lovingly prepared suddenly seemed nauseating. The beautiful meal was a monument to her own stupidity. He thought he was leaving a penniless orphan in his wake. He thought he was shedding dead weight to soar into the stratosphere of the elite. He had no idea of the storm he had just unleashed. In that moment, as the last vestiges of her love for him died, something else took its place. The pain was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, a different sensation began to burn. It was cold. It was hard. It was completely unfamiliar. It was rage, a Vance-sized rage. She looked at the divorce papers on the dining table, the legal instrument of her humiliation. "Quiet and quick," he had said. She picked up her phone, her hands surprisingly steady. She scrolled through her contacts, past the local plumber and the dentist, all the way to a name she hadn't called in 7 years. The screen glowed with 2 words: Javier Garcia. Her thumb hovered over the call button. The woman who made the call would not be the heartbroken wife in the blue dress. She would be the billionaire heiress he never knew existed. The game was over. The war was about to begin. The return of the heiress. The first 24 hours after Richard left were a blur of empty-eyed shock. Maeve didn't cry. The grief was too deep for tears, a vast, empty cavern where her heart used to be. She moved through the house like a ghost, her home now a museum of their shared lives. Every object was a painful artifact. The chipped coffee mug he used every morning, the worn armchair where he used to read, the photographs on the mantelpiece of a smiling, happy couple who had never really existed. She took a black trash bag and, with a cold, methodical precision, swept every photo, every gift, every last trace of him. It wasn't a catharsis. It was an exorcism. By dawn, the house was stripped of their shared past, as empty as she felt inside. She finally allowed herself to look in the mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger. Her eyes, usually so full of gentle warmth, were somber and haunted. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, messy ponytail. She wore one of Richard's old, faded t-shirts as a nightshirt. This was the woman he had discarded, the weak, simple, penniless orphan. He had created this version of her, and he had destroyed her. It was time for Maeve Vance to come home. She showered, the hot water a blessed shock to her system. She dressed not in her usual modest attire, but in the one emergency outfit she had kept hidden at the back of her closet. A pair of tailored black trousers, a silk blouse, and a pair of simple, elegant leather flats. They were relics from her old life, a contingency she had prayed she would never need. Then she made the call. The phone rang only once before a familiar, crisp, and calm voice answered. Javier Garcia speaking. Javier, she said, her own voice sounding rough and strange to her ears. It's me. There was a pause, a stunned, silent instant on the other end of the line. Javier Garcia, the gray-haired and impeccably dressed head of Vance Legal, had been her father's closest confidant and had managed her family's affairs with unshakable loyalty for over 30 years. He was more of a father to her than her own had been. Maeve, he finally breathed, the name a mix of surprise, relief, and deep, unexpressed concern. My dear girl, are you all right? No, she said, the single word conveying a world of hurt. I'm not, but I will be. She took a deep breath, the air in the sterile house feeling charged with a new energy. Javier, I'm coming back. I want you to execute Protocol Alpha, immediately. Protocol Alpha, the name they had devised years ago for the dissolution of the blind trust and the full reinstatement of her legal identity and financial power. It was the emergency button, the break glass in case of catastrophe contingency. Consider it done, Javier said, his voice instantly shifting from concerned guardian to ruthlessly efficient executive. A car will be at your location in 1 hour. We have the Mandarin Oriental penthouse in London prepared for you. Your security team is mobilizing as we speak. What are your immediate instructions? The house, she said, looking at the small suburban box that had been her cage. Sell it. Donate the contents to charity. I don't want to see a single thing from this life again. She paused, her gaze falling on the divorce papers still on the dining table. And Javier, I need you to find out everything there is to know about a man named Charles Rothschild and his private equity ventures. I also want a full dossier on his daughter, Victoria, and my husband, Richard Smith. I have a preliminary file on the Rothschilds already, Javier said, his tone grim. Charles has been trying to make inroads against Vance Corp. Shipping logistics for years. This isn't a coincidence, Maeve. It appears your husband was traded like a valuable asset. The clinical business term was somehow more insulting than any emotional betrayal. You weren't just left, you were strategically eliminated. I understand, she said, her voice hardening. One more thing, Javier. The divorce papers. Don't let Richard's lawyer file them. You will be handling the proceedings. My pleasure, Javier said, a touch of steel in his voice. We will file for adultery and fraud. His petition will be buried. He won't know what hit him. An hour later, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car so out of place in Hampton it might as well have been a spaceship, pulled up smoothly to her curb. A man in an impeccable suit, her new head of security, opened the door for her. As Maeve slid into the luxurious leather interior, she took one last look at the house, at the quiet street, at the life that was now nothing more than a bad dream. She didn't look back, as the car sped to the private airfield where a Vance Corp. Jet awaited Maeve's phone, a new state-of-the-art satellite model provided by her security, buzzed. It was an encrypted message from Javier. Attached was a single document, the summary of Vance Corp.'s holdings, line after line of incomprehensible numbers, company names, and market values that stretched into the billions. At the very end was the net worth of the inheritance she now fully controlled, £217.4 billion. She stared at the number, not with joy or triumph, but with a chilling sense of purpose. Richard had left her for a woman with resources. He had belittled her for having nothing. He had built his future on the foundation of her supposed poverty. He wanted to play in the big leagues. She was about to show him he wasn't even in the same sport. The penniless orphan was dead. Maeve Vance, the billionaire industrial titan, had returned from the ashes and was coming to collect a debt of 7 years of pain and humiliation with interest. The CEO returns. The transformation of Maeve Smith, the suburban wife, to Maeve Vance, the formidable CEO, was swift and absolute. It began the moment she stepped onto the tarmac at Heathrow Airport and into the rarefied air of her old life. The Mandarin Oriental penthouse, with its sweeping views of the majesty of Hyde Park, was her chrysalis. It was a world of silent, efficient staff, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the ambient hum of immense power. Javier Garcia was waiting for her, standing by a grand mahogany table covered with files and electronic tablets. He looked older than she remembered, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence and unshakable loyalty. He did not hug her or offer platitudes. He simply gave her a small, respectful nod. "Welcome back, Miss Vance," he said. The title, so foreign for so long, fit her like a custom-made suit. "It's good to be back, Javier." The first few days were a whirlwind of intense briefings. She was a quick study. Her mind, for so long occupied with domestic trivia, proved to be as sharp and analytical as her father's. She absorbed 7 years of market fluctuations, technological breakthroughs, and corporate strategy with a ferocious appetite. She wasn't just catching up. She was preparing for war. The physical transformation unfolded in parallel. The plain, unassuming woman from Hampton was systematically erased. A team of London's finest stylists, trainers, and nutritionists descended on the penthouse. Her long, unstyled hair was cut into a sleek, sharp bob that framed her face and highlighted her cheekbones. Her wardrobe of faded jeans and cotton sweaters was replaced with a carefully curated collection of Tom Ford power suits, elegant Dior dresses, and dangerously high Christian Louboutin stilettos. Her new uniform was armor. Every piece was chosen to project an aura of untouchable power and icy elegance. She learned to walk with a new posture, a straight-backed confidence that commanded attention. The soft, gentle cadence of her speech was polished into a precise, measured tone that brooked no argument. Within a week, she was ready. Her reappearance was not going to be a quiet affair. It was going to be a statement. Javier had organized an emergency meeting of the Vance Corp. Board of Directors, a collection of powerful, aging men who had grown comfortable in her absence, managing the empire under Javier's steady hand, but with no true Vance at the helm. She walked into the Vance Corp. boardroom on the 80th floor of their London skyscraper. The click of her heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the cavernous room. All conversation ceased. The 12 board members, titans of industry in their own right, stared at her as if they had seen a ghost. They remembered a quiet, grief-stricken teenager. They were not prepared for the woman standing before them now. "Good morning, gentlemen." Her voice was cold and steady as she took her seat at the head of the table, her father's seat. "I apologize for my long absence. I was occupied with other matters. Rest assured, my sabbatical is over." She didn't wait for their responses. She launched directly into a brilliant, ruthless analysis of the company's performance, pointing out missed opportunities, bloated divisions, and a lack of aggressive innovation. She laid out a bold new vision for Vance Corp, one that involved a major push into sustainable energy and a strategic acquisition of a cutting-edge artificial intelligence firm. She had their complete, undivided attention. The sleepy, complacent energy of the room had been replaced by a palpable tension, a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration. But her grand strategy had a more personal, more direct target. "Finally," she said, her eyes sweeping the room. "I have reviewed the file on Rothschild Banking's recent ventures. Their attempts to undermine our shipping logistics are amateurish, but persistent. It's time we send a message." She pulled up a new file on the large screen at the front of the room. It was an innovative, mid-sized logistics company called Logi Next. Logi Next has developed a predictive shipping algorithm that could revolutionize the industry, she explained. Rothschild has been trying to acquire them for the last 6 months. Their offer is currently stalled at £900 million. She paused, letting the information sink in. "This morning," she continued, a shadow of a smile touching her lips, "Vance Corp. submitted a competing bid for $1.5 billion, all in cash. The deal will be closed by Friday." A murmur of astonished excitement rippled through the room. It was an aggressive, almost reckless move. It was a direct, public slap at Charles Rothschild. "Furthermore," Maeve said, her gaze turning to ice, "I have taken a look at the Rothschild's new private equity firm. It's a vanity project for his daughter and her new associate." She let the word hang in the air. "They appear to be focusing their initial investments on the luxury hospitality sector." She clicked to another slide, detailing a portfolio of boutique hotels. "We will begin a systematic acquisition of key properties in every market they target. We will outbid them, absorb their targets, and exhaust their seed capital before they sign their first deal. I want their firm to be a complete and total failure. Is that understood?" The board members, once skeptical, now looked at her with a new respect that bordered on fear. This was not Richard Vance's daughter. This was a predator. As the meeting adjourned, Javier stayed behind. "A bold re-entry, Maeve," he said, a glint of pride in his eyes. "Have you reminded them who's in charge?" "I wasn't talking to them, Javier," she said, looking out the window at the city below. A concrete jungle where only the strong survived. She was talking to him. She knew that the news of the Logi Next acquisition would hit the financial world like a thunderclap. Charles Rothschild would be furious, and Richard, so proud of his new position, his new life, would be right in the blast radius. He wanted to be in the big leagues. She had just changed the rules of his game, and he didn't even know he was playing against her. Do you think Richard realized the magnitude of the mistake he had made? Share your predictions in the comments. The unmaking of a man 2 months past. Richard Smith was living the life he had always dreamed of. He and Victoria Rothschild were the city's new power couple. They had just moved into a sprawling penthouse on Serrano Street, a wedding gift from her father. Richard had a new title, Senior Vice President at Rothschild Private Equity, a corner office with a panoramic city view and a wardrobe of tailored suits. At last, in his own mind, he was a success. However, a shadow loomed over his new paradise. His first major venture, a fund to acquire luxury boutique hotels, had been a spectacular failure. Every target they identified, every deal they pursued, was inexplicably snatched away at the last minute by an unseen, deep-pocketed competitor. Rumors on the London Stock Exchange whispered about a newly aggressive Vance Corp, but the moves were so precise, so targeted, that it felt personal. Charles Rothschild was losing capital and prestige, and the pressure trickled directly to Richard. "It's a ghost," Charles had snapped at him in a board meeting. "Someone is toying with us, and you, with your fancy LSE degree, don't seem to be able to figure out who." Tonight, however, was meant to be a reprieve, a celebration of their status. It was the annual Gala of Stars at the Prado Museum, the absolute pinnacle of London's social calendar. For Richard, this was his true arrival. He stood beside Victoria, her neck dripping in Rothschild diamonds, basking in the flash of cameras and the fawning greetings of the city's elite. He felt a surge of vindication. This was his place. For a fleeting moment, he thought of Maeve. He imagined her in her small house in Hampton, probably watching some cheap television show, completely oblivious to the glittering world he now inhabited. The thought filled him with a smug satisfaction. He had made the right choice. The grand doors to the Temple of Debod exhibition hall, where the main dinner was being held, opened. A hush fell over the crowd, a sudden collective holding of breath. The sea of famous faces parted as a new figure made her entrance. She wore a shimmering midnight blue silk gown that clung to her like a second skin, a single, breathtaking diamond necklace. The legendary Vance star rested on her collarbone, catching the light and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. Her dark hair was styled into an immaculate sharp bob, and her eyes, cold and calculating, swept the room, missing nothing. She was flanked by two men, the venerable Javier Garcia and Kaito Tanaka, the brilliant and reclusive CEO of a rival tech empire, a man who rarely made public appearances. Her presence radiated an almost gravitational pull of power and influence. Richard's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. His blood ran cold. The face was familiar, but the woman was an impossibility. It was Maeve, but it wasn't. It was as if his quiet, simple wife had been possessed by the spirit of a vengeful goddess. "Who is that?" Victoria hissed beside him, her voice tight with jealousy and intrigue. "I've never seen her before." A pudgy, red-faced banker, a man who had been fawning over them moments before, laughed nervously. "You've been out of the country too long, Victoria. That's no one. That's Maeve Vance." The name hit Richard like a physical blow. Vance. Vance Corp. The ghost in the machine that had been systematically dismantling his professional life. It couldn't be. It was a joke. A nightmare. "Vance?" Victoria repeated, her perfectly plucked brows rising. "The Maeve Vance? I thought she was a recluse. A ghost." "Well," the banker said, his eyes fixed on the approaching trio, "the ghost is back, and she's apparently friends with Kaito Tanaka. Rumor is they're working on a merger. Can you imagine? Vance Corp. and Tanaka Industries? They could buy God." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. His carefully constructed world was tilting on its axis. All the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. The failed hotel deals, the Logi Next acquisition, the inexplicable personal nature of the attacks on Rothschild. It had all been her. As if sensing his stare, Maeve's eyes met his across the crowded room. There was no flicker of recognition, no hint of their shared past. Her gaze was one of complete indifference, the kind of look one might give to a piece of furniture or a particularly uninteresting insect. That look was more devastating than any scream or accusation. It told him he was nothing to her. She, Kaito, and Javier moved through the room, a vortex of power. People Richard had been desperate to impress now fell all over themselves to get a moment of her time. Charles Rothschild, Victoria's formidable father, approached Maeve with a strained, obsequious smile. "Miss Vance," Charles said, his voice a summary of false cordiality. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm Charles Rothschild." Maeve extended a cold, gloved hand. "Mr. Rothschild, I've been following your recent market difficulties. Very unfortunate." Her voice was pure silk, but the words were pure venom. Charles's face tightened. "Indeed, it appears we have a rather aggressive new player to deal with." "Aggression is simply another word for efficiency," Maeve replied softly, before turning her full attention to Kaito Tanaka. Dismissing the Rothschild patriarch as if he were a junior associate, Victoria watched, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. She turned to Richard, her voice a poisonous whisper. "You know her, don't you? How do you know Maeve Vance?" Richard couldn't speak. His throat was dry. His mind was a chaotic symphony of denial and terror. Victoria's eyes narrowed, a shrewd, calculating light entering them. She looked at Richard's ashen face, then at the magnificent figure of Maeve Vance, and then back again. A slow, creeping horror spread across her features. "Oh my God," she breathed, the realization hitting her. "She's your ex-wife, the poor, pathetic orphan you told me about. That was her." Richard could only nod, a single, jerky motion. The smug satisfaction he had felt minutes earlier had turned into abject terror. He hadn't just divorced a simple suburban woman. He had betrayed, humiliated, and discarded the single most powerful woman in the room. He had thought he was climbing a ladder. Instead, he had just stepped off a cliff, and he was only just beginning to realize how far he had to fall. Do you think Richard deserved what was happening to him? Or did Maeve go too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments. A new beginning in the weeks following the gala, Richard's life unraveled with brutal speed. The Vance name was a death knell for his career at Rothschild. Charles, humiliated and furious, treated him with open contempt. Victoria, now seeing him not as a prize, but as the biggest fool in the world, was cold and distant. Their relationship was reduced to a series of bitter, whispered arguments in their cavernous, silent penthouse. Social invitations dried up. Fawning colleagues now avoided his gaze. He was a pariah, a walking cautionary tale. Maeve, meanwhile, operated from a sphere so far above him, he could only watch the fallout. She was a fixture in the financial news, a supernova of the industry. The merger of Vance Corp. And Tanaka Industries was being hailed as the deal of the century, creating a global juggernaut that dwarfed all competitors. Every one of her moves was precise, strategic, and devastatingly effective. But in the midst of the corporate warfare and financial machinations, Maeve felt hollow. The revenge, while satisfying, was a hollow victory. She had dismantled Richard's world, but it hadn't filled the void in her own. The penthouse felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, seeking refuge from her own thoughts, she did something she hadn't done in years. She went incognito to a small, independent art gallery in the Shoreditch neighborhood. dressed in simple jeans, a cashmere sweater, and a low-brimmed baseball cap. She was a nobody. She was just a woman, looking at art. The gallery was quiet. The air smelled of linseed oil and turpentine. The art was raw, powerful, and full of a desperate, beautiful energy. She was particularly drawn to a series of large, abstract canvases, chaotic swirls of black, white, and a defiant, electrifying blue. They spoke to the storm inside her own soul. There's something to them, isn't there? The voice, low and resonant, startled her. She turned to see a man standing beside her. He was tall, with kind, intelligent eyes, and hands stained with paint. He wore a paint-splattered t-shirt and worn-in jeans. He looked at the paintings, not her, a look of deep understanding on his face. "They're honest," Maeve replied, the words surprising her. "That's him," the man said, gesturing to a figure in the corner, the artist, who was talking animatedly with a potential buyer. "Lucas O'Connell. He paints like he's trying to get out of a locked room, all passion and fury." The man finally turned his gaze to her, a warm, genuine smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I'm the owner, Daniel." Caught off guard, she introduced herself simply as Maeve. For the next hour, Daniel guided her through the gallery, talking about the art, not with the pretentious jargon of the art world, but with a simple, heartfelt passion. He saw the story in every brushstroke, the emotion behind every color choice. He didn't ask her what she did, where she lived, or who she knew. He just talked to her about art. A part of herself, she believed long dead, began to stir. It was the art history student from LSE, the young woman who had been captivated by beauty and creation, not by balance sheets and market caps. She found herself returning to the gallery several times in the following weeks. She and Daniel developed an easy rapport. Their conversations moved from art to books to music and to the simple absurdities of life in London. With him, she wasn't a Vance. She was simply Maeve, a woman with a sharp eye and a quiet sadness he didn't pry into. He was a welcome anchor in the turbulency of her new life. Meanwhile, a new and unexpected player entered the game. Kaito Tanaka, her new business partner, was not the cold, reclusive genius the media portrayed. In their private meetings, she discovered a man with a dry wit, a fierce intelligence, and an almost unnerving ability to see through her carefully constructed armor. During a late-night strategy session in the Vance Corp. boardroom, as they finalized the details of the merger, he suddenly stopped, looking at her over the rim of his teacup. "You've enjoyed this, haven't you?" he asked, his dark eyes intense. "Dismantling Rothschild, humiliating your ex-husband." Maeve stiffened. It was a necessary business strategy. Kaito allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "Of course, but revenge is a fire that consumes the one who wields it, Miss Vance. It will keep you warm for a while, but it will eventually leave you with only ashes." He set down his cup. "Charles Rothschild is an old fool. Your husband is an insignificant parasite. They are not worthy of the energy you are spending on them. This company, our company, that is worthy of your energy. The future we can build is worthy of it." His words hit a nerve deep inside her. He wasn't judging her. He was challenging her. He saw her not as a weapon of vengeance, but as a brilliant leader, and he was calling her to be better. He was the first person in her new life to speak of the future, not the past. "What do you propose?" she asked. "I propose," he said quietly, his eyes glowing with a new intensity, "that we stop playing defense. Let's build something revolutionary. Let's pour our resources into the new sustainable energy division. Let's create something that changes the world, not just settle old scores. That is a victory worthy of a Vance and a Tanaka." It was a turning point. Kaito's challenge, combined with the simple human connection she was finding with Daniel at the art gallery, began to shift her perspective. The rage that had driven her was beginning to cool, replaced by a new, more compelling ambition. She had proven she could destroy. Now she was beginning to wonder if she could build again. The war against Richard and the Rothschilds had been won, but the battle for her own soul, for the woman she wanted to become, was just beginning. And for the first time, she felt like she didn't have to fight it alone. She had found allies not in bankers and lawyers, but in an artist's quiet gallery and across a boardroom table, with a man who saw her future, not just her past. Do you think Maeve should forgive Richard or move on with her life without looking back? We want to know your opinion. The final reckoning, Richard Smith's freefall, was swift and brutal. Fired from Rothschild, he became toxic on the London Stock Exchange. His lavish lifestyle evaporated after a venomous annulment from Victoria, who even forced him to legally change his name to break ties with her family. Broken and stripped of his identity, he moved into a dreary apartment in the Camden Town neighborhood, where his ambition soured into a dangerous obsession. In his twisted logic, Maeve owed him for waking her up, and he convinced himself he could still win her back. He began a campaign of pathetic harassment. Dozens of pleading, then threatening, emails and voicemails, all intercepted by Javier's team. When his messages went unanswered, his desperation led him to stalking. One night, he evaded security and confronted her in the private elevator lobby as she was leaving with Kaito Tanaka. "Maeve!" he shouted, his appearance disheveled, his eyes wild. She looked at the hollow shell of the man she had married. "Richard!" Her voice was devoid of emotion. "You need to stop this." "Stop this?" He laughed hysterically. "I'm just getting started. You think you can ruin me and walk away? I know the real you, the scared little woman who plays dress-up. This isn't you." Kaito took a slight step forward. "I think you should leave." Richard's gaze was filled with hatred. "And who are you? Her new pet?" Maeve cut him off, her voice like ice. "He's my partner, Richard. Something you never were." She turned and walked away without a second glance. The public rejection pushed him over the edge. If he couldn't have her, he would destroy her. He sold a twisted, fabricated story to a notorious tabloid journalist, Marcus Ferris, painting himself as the victim of a manipulative, mentally unstable heiress. "She hid billions to trap unwary husband," the headline screamed. The story was filled with distorted, intimate details designed to lend it credibility. Simultaneously, Charles Rothschild, seeking revenge, fed damaging stories to the financial press, questioning Maeve's stability and fitness to run a global empire. The combined assault was a perfect storm. Vance Corp's stock took a small hit, and whispers about Maeve's sanity began in the trading rooms. She was in a meeting with Javier and Kaito when the news broke. Javier was apoplectic, planning a multi-billion-pound lawsuit. Maeve, however, was unnervingly calm as she read the article. Inside, the cold rage from the night Richard left solidified. He had weaponized her intimacy, twisting the life she built out of love into something pathological. "Don't sue them, Javier," she said quietly. "Maeve, we must," he insisted. "We can't allow this." "No," she said, her eyes glinting with a new, dangerous light. "A lawsuit is a battle. He has declared a war. And in a war, you don't file papers. You demand an unconditional surrender." She turned to Kaito, a chilling smile on her face. "He thinks he can control the narrative by exposing our past. He's forgotten one detail. I know all of his secrets too, and unlike him, I have the proof." The time for reacting was over. Richard and Rothschild had pushed her too far, mistaking her restraint for weakness. Now she would show them what real power was. She would end this not by winning, but by annihilating them completely. Maeve's counterattack was not a single explosive event, but a masterfully orchestrated symphony of destruction. It began in silence. She unleashed the full, terrifying power of Vance Corp's legal and intelligence divisions, the teams Javier Garcia had kept razor sharp. Her first target was Marcus Ferris and his tabloid. Within days, Vance Corp. Investigators had unearthed a career's worth of corruption. Javier didn't file a lawsuit. He personally delivered the entire incriminating file to the district attorney's office. Ferris was arrested, and the story he had written about Maeve was publicly discredited. Next, she turned her attention to Rothschild. While he had been busy planting stories about her instability, Maeve's team had been running a deep forensic audit on the entire Rothschild banking operation. They found a pattern of insider trading and fraud. The evidence was irrefutable. Javier Garcia arranged a private meeting with the Rothschild board, pointedly excluding Charles. He presented the evidence, explaining that Vance Corp now held a majority stake in Rothschild's debt. The message was clear. Either Charles Rothschild was removed, or Vance Corp would release the evidence and call in their debt, an act that would vaporize the Rothschild legacy. Within 24 hours, the board announced that Charles was stepping down for health reasons. His attack on Maeve had cost him his empire. The final piece of her strategy was reserved for Richard. It was going to be the most public and devastating blow of all. She agreed to her first televised interview with Sarah Jenkins, a legendary journalist known for her tough questions. The interview was broadcast live, in prime time. Maeve came on looking serene and powerful in a simple white dress. For the first half, she spoke eloquently about her vision for Vance Corp. Then, Jenkins changed topics. "Miss Vance, I have to ask about the recent, very public attacks on you. Your ex-husband, Richard Smith, has made some very serious accusations." Maeve looked directly into the camera, her expression one of sad resolve. "That's right," she said calmly. "Richard and I were married for 7 years. At his request, I lived a life separate from my family's resources. I did this because I was in love." The story he told was a painful, twisted version of our life. But what he didn't mention was the reason our marriage ended. From a folder, she produced a sworn affidavit detailing Richard's affair with Victoria Rothschild, which began over a year before their divorce. Then she pulled out emails between Richard and Charles Rothschild that outlined the plan to trade his penniless wife for a senior position at the firm. "He didn't just leave me," Maeve stated. "He sold me." The control room was in stunned silence, but she wasn't done. "Mr. Smith has accused me of ruining him. The truth is, he was never the man he pretended to be." She slid his old credit card statements onto the table. "These detail thousands of pounds spent on luxury items, while he was telling me we couldn't afford to fix a leak in our roof. And this," she held up one last sheet, "is his college application to LSE, where he lied about being an orphan long before he met me. Richard Smith's entire life has been a calculated fraud." She looked back at the camera, her eyes clear. "I didn't destroy that man. I simply held up a mirror to him. My only fault was to love someone incapable of loving anyone but himself. I have paid the price for that mistake. And now, so has he." She ended the interview by announcing the launch of the Vance Foundation, a $2 billion trust to support victims of emotional and financial abuse. In his Camden Town apartment, Richard watched his world collapse. She had exposed him completely. The reckoning was final. In the wake of it all, the world saw Maeve as a role model of strength. Vance Corp's stock soared. Richard, a social leper, disappeared. He was rumored to be working a menial job somewhere in northern England, a ghost of his own ambitions, finding a true home. Maeve's life, for the first time, was truly her own. The rage had subsided, leaving peace. The empire was no longer a burden, but a tool to innovate and build. Under her and Kaito Tanaka's leadership, the newly merged Vance Corp. And Tanaka Industries became a global leader in sustainable technology. Her work was her passion, a legacy that would dwarf the small dramas of her past. Her partnership with Kaito was one of deep mutual respect and shared vision. But it was outside the boardroom that she found the quiet joy that had so long eluded her. She continued her visits to Daniel's art gallery in Shoreditch, always as Maeve. He remained a stabilizing force, drawn to her quiet intelligence and resilient spirit, knowing nothing of her immense power. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after her return, they were walking through Hyde Park. "You seem lighter," Daniel observed. Maeve smiled. "I feel lighter. There's something I need to tell you. My name isn't Maeve." She told him everything. The Vance name, the hidden life, the betrayal, the comeback. Daniel listened patiently. When she finished, a long silence stretched between them. "So," he finally said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "does this mean I have to start calling you Miss Vance?" Maeve laughed, a sound of pure relief. "I prefer Maeve." "Well, Maeve," he said, his eyes twinkling, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Now, are you going to finish that coffee, or are you going to use your billions to buy the whole cart?" In that moment, standing in the heart of the city she now dominated, Maeve felt a profound sense of completeness. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and emerged not just victorious, but whole. She was surrounded by people who saw her for who she truly was. Kaito, who respected her mind. Daniel, who treasured her spirit. She had lost a fantasy built on a lie, but she had gained something infinitely more valuable, a reality of her own making. The hidden heiress was gone forever, replaced by a woman who stood proudly in the light, the owner of her own vast, brilliant, and limitless horizon. He betrayed her, broke her, and left her with nothing. Or so he thought. Maeve Vance's incredible journey, from hidden wife to billionaire powerhouse, is a testament to the unbreakable strength of a woman scorned. She didn't just get revenge, she rewrote the entire game. Her story proves that your past does not define you, and the deepest betrayals can forge the most powerful versions of ourselves. She took her pain and turned it into a global empire, and her heartbreak into a beacon of hope for others. If this story of resilience and ultimate triumph resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a dose of inspiration, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable real-life dramas. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Maeve's epic comeback.